Hello, minnow nerds, etc. My name is Will Lowen, and I have an odd question. Are there spies in our midst? If I were to go looking for spies in my own congregation, I wouldn't be the first Mennonite pastor to do so. From time to time, I chat with a friend of mine who grew up in communist Russia, and he and a number of people in his community were convinced that the Russian government, the Communist Party, were curious about what was happening in their congregation and would send spies to gather information about who was there, how many people were there, and what sort of anti-communist propaganda was happening in their gatherings. Reading the history books of the early Anabaptist churches, they were regularly on the lookout for spies in their own congregations. People who were very curious about how many people were gathering, who was in charge, were there any baptisms. Even Jesus warned his followers about wolves in sheep's clothing. And if I were to find a spy in my own congregation, I might call that person a Judas, right? Because Jesus dealt with spies and people who were subverting the group that he was leading. And that's really only the churches that I know about. Around the world and throughout history, Christian groups have been gathering, arousing the suspicion of their governments and other powerful religious groups. And so this is not a new struggle, as odd as it might sound. Now, I'm not the pastor of a persecuted church. We're inconvenienced, if anything. But in Canada, the Canadian Revenue Agency is very curious about charities, churches, and nonprofit organizations wanting to know if we are staying within our guidelines. And so, are we doing what we said we would be doing? Are we gathering the money that we say that we're gathering and spending it accordingly? Are we lobbying for or against any particular political party? And so it would make sense that the government, being curious about these things, would send individuals to listen for that kind of thing. A while ago, there was a kidnapping, a hostage-taking in Afghanistan. 4 members of Christian peacemaker teams were there, they were captured, and while the rest of the world turned to see what was happening there, their abductors said, no, these are not peace workers, they are spies. And so I asked some of my friends working for peace agencies, and I said, does this kind of thing happen? Isn't this absurd? And they said, well, first of all, these 4 men are not spies. These are our friends, our colleagues, our brothers. They're not spies. But there are spies in peace agencies around the world because governments are very curious about what's happening, and so they have agents there. Believe it or not, it seems feasible. And so I asked, what are the signs that you might look for? Well, someone who asks a lot of questions, someone who's nosy, someone who subverts authority, who might sow division, trying to kind of break down the group, and someone who uses the right words, but somehow their behavior is disconnected. Well, these people are there, and we might be on the lookout for them, but the challenge isn't to find them. The challenge is to demonstrate to them and anybody else that we are who we say we are, and we love the way that Jesus taught us to love. So it's a fun game, but it's a very serious challenge.